Okay, so last video we talked about the abomination of desolation, and that is a very critical, crucial, important milestone in the end time timeline. So that's right here, the abomination of desolation. It's spoken of in Daniel chapter 9. It's also referred to indirectly as a time after which a certain event will happen, that the Jews are going to have to flee into the wilderness. And we're going to see that flight of the remnant of Israel in the rest of this passage in Matthew 24. Verse 21, "For then there will be great tribulation, such as has not been from the beginning of the world until now, no, and never will be." Okay, that's quite a statement that Jesus is making, that there's going to be a time of tribulation, of great tribulation. Remember back here with the fifth seal martyrs, believers were in tribulation. They had their own great tribulation. It only lasted about 10 days. That was 10 days of very intense persecution. There probably will be persecution that lasts longer, but there's going to be 10 days of very intense persecution from what we're seeing by the clues we're reading in Revelation. But the Jews are going to have so much tribulation that it's not even, you can't compare anything else with it. It didn't matter, stuff during the time of Noah or the stuff that preceded Noah, what Hitler did to the Jews in World War II. None of that will hold a candle to the kind of persecution that the Jews are going to be facing during the last days. And so when people talk about the last 3.5 years of a 7-year timeline as being the time of great tribulation, we know that there will be great tribulation. We know that the woman is going to flee into the wilderness. That is, the remnant of Israel will flee into the wilderness for 1,260 days. So let's take a look at Daniel chapter 12. This is another passage that talks about this time period of time times and half a time, or 1,260 days, that there's going to be tribulation for the Jews. "At that time shall arise Michael, the great prince, who has charge of your people. And there shall be a time of trouble, such as has never been, since there was a nation till that time. But at that time your people shall be delivered, every one whose name shall be found written in the book." Now we know that there's going to be a remnant of Israel who will be delivered during this period of time. Revelation 12, 7 and 8 also talks about Michael. Daniel talked about when Michael arises, or when Michael stands up, there's going to be a terrible time of tribulation. Why? What is it that Michael's doing that sort of causes this to happen, or is a part of the beginning of this? And that's actually found, I think, in Revelation 12 verses 7 and 8. "Now war arose in heaven, Michael and his angels fighting against the dragon. And the dragon and his angels fought back, but he was defeated, and there was no longer any place found for them in heaven." So this great tribulation for the Jews that Daniel spoke about in Daniel chapter 12 verse 1, where Michael the great prince shall arise, and then there'll be a time of trouble that has never been. This happens right at the time that Michael arises in heaven, basically, and casts Satan out of heaven. We know that once Satan comes to the earth, that's when he will begin to pursue the woman, and there will be a terrible, terrible time on the earth. So in my notes, this is what I say here. The Great Tribulation will start around the time that Satan is cast to the earth. Both Daniel and Revelation make a reference to Michael's involvement in the end time events, especially around the time of the abomination of desolation. Michael is the angel who will lead the armies of heaven in the battle against the devil and his angels, and Michael will prevail, and Satan and his cohorts will be cast out of heaven permanently. And they're going to be coming to the earth. Okay, and we know that the dragon, or Satan, is the one who's going to be pursuing the woman, that is the remnant of Israel, into the wilderness. Let's look at verse 22 of Matthew 24. "And if those days had not been cut short, no human being would be saved, but for the sake of the elect, those days will be cut short. Lots of questions here, but let's read another passage that goes along with this in Revelation 12:5. And the beast was given a mouth uttering haughty and blasphemous words, and it was allowed to exercise authority for 42 months. And Daniel 7:25. And he shall speak words against the Most High. That is, I think this is a reference to the Antichrist or the beast. And shall wear out the saints of the Most High, and shall think to change the times and the law, and they shall be given into his hand for a time, times, and half a time. A lot of people wonder, okay, if those days hadn't been cut short, no human being would be saved, but for the sake of the elect, those days will be cut short. My understanding is that they've been cut short from whatever time it could have been to 42 months. 42 months, or time, times, and half a time, which is a year, 2 years, and a half a year. That's what time, times, and half a time means. It's 3.5 years, which is the same thing as 1,260 days, or the same thing as 42 months. All of these are equivalencies, that the time has already been shortened to 42 months, and that if God didn't do that, there wouldn't be anybody left to rescue or to save. Nobody would survive this. So the time of trouble is limited to 42 months, or a time, times, and half a time. That's the limitation. That's how short it's been cut. I mean, that isn't very long in the grand scheme of things. When you consider we've had at least 6,000 years of human history since Adam, that Satan will be given 3.5 of those years to do what he wants to do. So that's actually a very short amount of time. It's quite short when you consider it compared to all the rest of our history. Now, the other question here that kind of comes up is, who are the elect? Okay, the word for elect is just the word for chosen. Okay, and there are a lot of people or groups of people that are the elect, or have been chosen by God. We know that Israel was chosen from among the nations, right? There's passages that talk about that. We also know that we've been chosen in Christ, that is, believers are the elect. And really, it's anybody that God has said, I choose you, okay? You are part of the elect. And it's for the sake of God's people that those days are going to be cut short. And I believe it's for the sake of both Israel and people who are believers at that time. And remember, not everybody is going to be martyred here. Not all Christians are going to be martyred there. The remnant of Israel is going to be going into the wilderness for 1,260 days. So we have a couple of groups of people that God has chosen. All right, let's take a look at false Christs. This is appearing again. Remember, we talked about false Christs appearing back here with the first seal, when the rider on the white horse came out and Jesus was warning about Christ, and false Christs are going to appear. Now he's going to say there is a very specific warning for the Jews about their Messiah. Very, very specific warning. So we've already seen that this guy who does the abomination of desolation, he's going to stand in the holy place, a place where he doesn't belong, and he's going to claim to be the Christ. He's going to claim to be Messiah. And that's basically what we read in Revelation about the beast, that he's going to claim to be God, to be Messiah. And we read about that in Revelation chapter 13. But what Jesus is saying here, there is someone who's going to come and say he's the Christ. But remember, at the same time, the real Christ is also going to have come. He's going to have come to lead the remnant into the wilderness on the two wings of a great eagle. God is going to deliver his people himself. He'll do it through Christ. And also that passage that we read about in Zechariah, where Jesus' feet stand on the Mount of Olives. And I'm just going to interject something here. Back in, I think it was 2015 or something like that, there was this little Jewish boy, Nathan, who had a kind of a near-death experience. And he saw end-time events. He wasn't a particularly religious kid. He lived in Israel, but he didn't know scriptures or anything like that. And there were a couple of things that he said that got me to thinking. One of them was he talked about how the Mount of Olives was going to split in two. That is, that there were going to be two men who would rise from the dead, and that somebody would come, who basically he inferred was the Messiah, would come and deliver people. He would smell them to see if they had the right kind of smell. That's what Nathan said. Okay, so I'm listening to that and I'm going, my teaching had taught me that Jesus wouldn't return until to the Mount of Olives until Armageddon, until the very end. And although I found it very curious that there were these two men who were going to rise from the dead, that's the two witnesses, I would assume, and that this mountain was going to split in two, and that someone was going to be leading them into the wilderness. And I'm thinking, can that be true? Can that be the case where it's actually Jesus that comes back to lead his people, just like he led them out of Egypt and into the wilderness at that time? And we know that it was the angel of the Lord who led the children of Israel, out of Egypt into the promised land, that the angel of the Lord was in the pillar of cloud and fire leading these people. That a lot of times when you see the angel of the Lord in the Old Testament, we're talking about a pre-incarnate appearance of the Son of God, of Jesus. Only he hasn't become Jesus yet because he's not a man yet. He's God's servant or God's messenger to do God's work and God's will on the earth. And so this was very interesting to me. And the more I started looking at this, the more I realized, I think we have been taught wrong when we say that the Mount of Olives is where Jesus is going to return at the end of a tribulation, the end of 7 years, or at the time of Armageddon, when really it appears that Jesus is actually going to return and get his people and take them into the wilderness, that is the Jews, right there at the time of the abomination of desolation. I throw that out there for your consideration, that I wouldn't have thought any differently if I hadn't listened to that vision of Nathan, back in 2015. What Jesus is saying, that there's going to be false Christs and false prophets that are going to arise, and they're going to perform great signs and wonders so as to lead astray, if possible, even the elect. That is, people who've been chosen by God as his special people, that if it's possible to lead them astray, they will be led astray. So Revelation 13, verses 13 to 15, and it performs great signs, that is the false prophet, making fire come down from heaven to earth in front of people, and by the signs it's allowed to work in the presence of the beast. It deceives those who dwell on earth. By the way, those who dwell on earth are also called the earth dwellers, and the signs are meant to deceive people who want to be deceived. The earth dwellers are not good people. In the book of Revelation, it's sort of a category of people who are in love with the things of this earth. There are people who dwell in heaven, those are believers. There are people who are earth dwellers, and those are people who are too enmeshed in what's happening in the world here to care about spiritual things. And those are the people that are going to be deceived, those who dwell on earth. The second half of verse 14, the false prophet tells them to make an image for the beast that was wounded by the sword and yet lived. And it was allowed to give breath to the image of the beast, so that the image of the beast might even speak and might cause those who would not worship the image of the beast to be slain. 2 Thessalonians 2, 9 and 10 also talk about this deception of false signs and wonders. The coming of the lawless one is by the activity of Satan with all power. Okay, there's a lot of power here that we don't think Satan has, but Satan has a lot of power, and he can work false signs and wonders, and with all wicked deception for those who are perishing, because they refused to love the truth and so be saved. Okay, verse 25 of Matthew 24. And this is where I think it gets really interesting, and I think we've kind of missed the mark on how to interpret this next little section. So I hope you'll hang in there with me while we look at these next few verses, and then we'll save the sixth seal and the wrath of God for the next video. Okay, so verse 25 of Matthew 24. See, I have told you beforehand. Okay, Jesus is telling us ahead of time what is going to happen, so that forewarned is forearmed. Okay, and who is he talking to here? Is he talking to Christians, to believers, people who survived that martyrdom and are now into the reign of the beast? Is he talking to the Jews? Who is he talking to? My personal opinion, from what I've seen here about the clues, I think he's talking to the Jews, and I think he's referring back to the time when he's going to come and collect this remnant of Israel and lead them into the wilderness. So I'll explain why I'm making that connection here in just a minute. Verse 26, so if they say to you, look, he's in the wilderness, do not go out. If they say, look, he's in the inner rooms, do not believe it. For as the lightning comes from the east and shines as far as the west, so will be the coming of the Son of Man. Wherever the corpse is, there the vultures will gather. Okay, this phrase is, all of this is very colorful and kind of confusing. And if you're someone who's always reading the rapture into passages, a lot of people think they can see the rapture in this passage, but it's more likely that this is talking again about the remnant who is going to be fleeing into the wilderness, the need for haste, and the idea that once Jesus comes to get these people, he's not coming back to get any more. So if people say to you, oh, he's back, he's come back to rescue you. He's in the inner rooms, go in there, you'll find him there. Or he's in the wilderness, go out, go, find him out there. Jesus is saying, don't do it. If that's the case with you, don't go. Because I'm telling you this ahead of time. Okay? I'm telling you this, I'm warning you this ahead of time. And notice Jesus really is only warning the Jews that when they see the abomination, they're to flee. And they need to go fast. It's going to be sad. It's going to be hard. Don't go back to collect anything. Just run, 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 run. Revelation 12 tells us that the woman is going to flee. Zechariah tells us there's going to be an earthquake, and the Jews will flee through the opening that the earthquake has caused. They're just going to basically run for their lives. And Jesus is saying, I'm telling you this ahead of time. I've told you ahead of time. You have to run. And don't believe it when they're telling you these things. Okay? For as lightning comes from the east and shines as far as the west, so will the coming, or the parousia, or the appearance of the Son of Man be. So when Jesus comes, he's coming very quickly. This is not the second coming of Christ. When Jesus comes at his second coming, he's coming and he is staying. This is not a flash where he's here and then he's gone. And this next little part here is sort of the part that people get confused on, and I think this is the part that is the illustration of what Jesus is talking about. Wherever the corpse is, there the vultures will gather. Okay, so wherever you see the dead body, you're going to find a bunch of vultures, feeding on that dead body. Okay, and a lot of people are very offended here by my comparison, but I hope you can understand that Jesus did die, and we feed on him. It's because he died for us and his blood was shed that we can feed on him. But wherever you see a body, okay, wherever the body is, and you may not actually see the body, but you'll know that it's there because it's surrounded by a bunch of vultures who are feeding on it. So in this illustration, I think that Jesus is the carcass, or the body, and the Jews who are going to surround him as they're fleeing into the wilderness, the vultures are going to be where the body is. Okay, they're going to be where Christ is. But if you're one of those people who wants to follow Jesus and you're a Jew at that time, it's going to be so fast, you have to do it right away. There's no second chance here. And that's why Jesus is saying, I've told you ahead of time. At the second coming of Christ, it's not going to be this flash of lightning. Every eye is going to see him. He's going to remain here to rule and reign on the earth. But at the time when he comes to collect that remnant of Israel, he is not going to linger. It's going to be lightning quick. And this rather grotesque illustration of the vultures surrounding a body or a corpse represents Christ as the body and the remnant of Israel as the little vultures who will surround and engulf him as he guides them to safety. He'll be hidden by the mass of humanity following him as they flee Jerusalem, and he will provide nourishment for them during their stay in the wilderness. All right, so in the next video, we're going to talk about the sixth seal. This is a really, 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 really important video. And I think some of you who've watched my videos for a while are going to understand that, a lot of this is kind of review. But basically what I'm doing here is using the timeline that Jesus gives us in the Gospel of Matthew, and I'm inserting passages from Revelation primarily, also from Daniel, and I've done a couple from 2 Thessalonians and Zechariah 14 as well. On the next video, we're going to take a look at the sixth seal, the wrath of God, the day of the Lord, and a bunch of other things, and I hope you'll be back for that. So we'll see you on another video. Leave a comment, and until then, have a very blessed day.